At AFM, we're committed to not only bringing people to faith in Christ, but also to continue on the process of discipleship. As we focus on this, just like Jesus and the apostles did, God oftentimes steps down and does amazing miracles in the lives of the indigenous believers that we're training. There's a story of one indigenous believer that I trained a few years back. In one of these second or third generation churches that they were planting up in the mountains, the leader that I trained, named Manuel, started training another leader by the name of Aton. Aton was himself fairly new to the faith. He was solidly grounded in the Bible. He was in love with Jesus, but he hadn't really spent a lot of time. He had just recently come to know Jesus, but Manuel recognized God's calling in his life to be a leader of the church up there, and so he spent extra time training him, teaching him how to study from the Bible, even when Manuel wasn't going to be around to help him out. And then he committed the care of that church and the local mission work into his hands. Just before Manuel left, he told Aton, "Remember, whatever problems come to you, whatever experiences you have, whatever difficulties you go through, give them to God, talk to God about them, pray and tell God about them." And then Manuel left. Aton did his very best as a church leader, and God worked through him powerfully. The church there was established, and it was growing, and it was starting to spread into local areas. But one day, Aton's baby became very, very sick. He and his wife rocked their baby in the hammock, but despite all that they could do, the baby got sicker and sicker and sicker. They couldn't get out to the hospital during that time of year. A lot of times when it's raining really hard, the rivers flood and you're trapped up in the mountains. It wasn't long before their baby died. When he stopped breathing, when they could no longer feel a heartbeat, they laid their baby down on the floor, and just in shock and in grief, they went right outside of their little hut, sat on the ground, and just stared at the ground, overcome with their grief. As is the way of the people here, the whole village gathered together. Everyone gathered around, giving advice, giving comfort, and one by one, every member of the village went through the house checking on the baby. Every one of them checked for a pulse, every one of them checked for breathing, and every one of them concluded that the baby truly was dead. Finally, the elders came to Aton and his wife and said, "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but it's time. In our culture, if a baby dies in the night, before the sun comes up, we need to have buried him already. So it's time that we wrap your baby up and that we take him out and bury him." Those words kind of woke Aton up. He hadn't really been analyzing what was going on, and as he heard those words, he remembered the last thing that Manuel had said to him, and he realized that he hadn't prayed to God about this problem, about this situation. He didn't know what God would do or if God would really step in and help him, but he knew that he needed to talk to God about it. So leaving his wife out there outside of the hut, he went back in the hut. He put his hands on his baby, telling him of the grief that he was experiencing and the struggles that he was going through, serving God and begging that if God saw his way best, that he would do a miracle, that he would come down and would show himself strong. And he kept on praying and praying, and as Aton was praying, he slowly started feeling his baby get warm. And as he continued praying, his baby got warmer and warmer and warmer until he came back to normal temperature. He still wasn't breathing though. He turned his baby over and he gave him a good slap on the rump, and sure enough, the baby started crying. It was the most beautiful sound that Aton had ever heard, and he started crying and praising God. He called his wife in, and the whole village came in with him. Everyone saw that God had brought Aton's baby back to life again in answer to his prayer. As we work here in the mountains of Mindoro, not only bringing people to Christ, but especially focusing on training local leaders who continue on the work even more effectively than we ever could. So often we see and we hear of stories just like that, like this one, of how God steps down and works with us, partners with us, to show himself strong, to demonstrate his power to these people who really have grown up in shamanism have grown up with spirits all their lives, and demonstrates how he is more powerful than any of the spirits these people have lived with, shows himself strong on behalf of those who love him and serve him. Some of you who are watching this may have heard God's call on your heart to be a missionary. Maybe you haven't yet answered the call because you're afraid. Maybe you're not sure if you really can live the life of a missionary. You've heard stories of how dangerous it can be in other places and in other countries. May this story be a reminder that wherever we go, whatever situation we find ourselves in, when we follow God's call to be faithful to Him and to be a witness to Him, God is with us. God will protect us, and God will work through us to bring people to faith. So don't let anything stand in between you and God's call to be a missionary.